Good evening. Welcome everybody and thank you for attending this session. My name is Adam Davey. I'm CEO of the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust. We're based in Canberra, and I'm participating in this webinar from Ngunnawal country. I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nations people, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and to welcome all Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander people watching this session. I'm going to begin this information session with an overview of what Churchill Fellowships are about and give you some insights into how you go about applying and the sorts of things we're looking for. Then we're going to hear from two fantastic Churchill Fellows who both work in the education sector, so Anita and Ganga Fraser. A little bit of housekeeping. So you'll be able to ask questions via the chat function as the sessions go along. We will be holding off answering those questions till the end. If we're getting a lot of questions and some of them are sort of more routine process questions, I can answer them through the chat as we go. Anything that's really stand out we'll cover off at the end, and obviously questions you've got specific to Ganga or to Anita, they'll be able to talk about them at the end as well. So without further ado, I'm just going to share my screen and give you an exciting PowerPoint presentation, which I'll try to keep fairly brief. So I think it's important to understand a little bit of the history about the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust and Churchill Fellowships. We often get asked, where does the funding come from? How did they come about? So when Winston Churchill resigned as British Prime Minister in 1955 at 80 years of age, he'd served under 5 reigning monarchs and survived 3 wars. He'd been a writer, an historian, a journalist, a painter, an adventurer. He'd won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1953. I think we all know something about Winston Churchill. And as you'd expect, there was a widespread desire to honour Sir Winston and capture the essence of his public service, his inspiration, his intellect, and of course his humour for generations to come. And we acknowledge, as everyone does, he wasn't perfect, and you can read some insightful essays that we've commissioned on our website that explore Sir Winston Churchill through a contemporary lens. But there is no doubt that Sir Winston readily believed that anything was possible if you put your mind to it, and that the greatest figures in history were those who made a contribution to public service and to their fellow countrymen. And so when Prime Minister Sir Robert Menzies announced Sir Winston's death to Australians in January 1965, he simultaneously announced the launch of a national fundraising appeal to create or establish the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust. So we're a perpetual, memorial to Sir Winston. And our job is to administer and award Churchill Fellowships. So on that fundraising day, which was 28th of February 1965, there was a door-to-door door-knock appeal, and over 220,000 Australians participated with the support of our Return Services League. And that was so successful that the banks opened on a Sunday to receive the funds. So it still, I think, remains one of Australia's most successful public fundraising appeals. And so that's where the funding came from. So we're really the people's trust. And of course, there were businesses and governments that contributed to the fundraising appeal to establish the trust. So who are Churchill Fellows? Well, the typical Churchill Fellow, or people who apply, are people who tend to believe in something very strongly. They're passionate about making a positive impact in their community. So they're the types of people that are really committed to some sort of change in a positive way. And they want to learn and they want to share that knowledge so that other people in their community might benefit. And a Churchill Fellowship itself is much more than a study abroad program. So it's much more than a study tour. It's an opportunity to become an expert in your field and make a real impact in the world. It's unique, it's prestigious. A Churchill Fellowship opens doors that otherwise might not be open to you, both overseas and here in Australia. It's not an academic scholarship, so you don't need to have had any particular educational qualification behind you in order to apply for one. And it's not a funding grant, it's much more freeing than that. So you're not required to quit every cent and every minute that you spend on it. It's a very empowering experience and a transformational experience being a Churchill Fellow. It's really the start of a lifelong journey and your contribution to making Australia better. So a Churchill Fellowship doesn't need to comprise a formal research program. You can learn new skills, you can undertake courses, you can build networks, and you can observe best practice in your chosen field. It is predominantly for overseas travel, and it must be between 4 to 8 weeks taken in one continuous journey. And there are some changes and some flexibility, which I'll talk to shortly in relation to that. We've awarded over 4,500 Churchill Fellowships since 1965, and each year we aim to award around 100 more. And Churchill Fellows honestly travel across the globe on an incredibly wide and diverse range of topics, and they bring back to this country so many things: information, networks, projects, products, ideas, innovations. Just a whole lot of energy and positivity, which results in a lot of positive change in Australia. So to be eligible, you do need to be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident and aged 18 by the application closing date, which is 1 May this year. The ability to travel overseas really is essential. However, we can provide some support for you. If you have a disability, for example, we can fund a carer to go with you. However, if you have a disability or caring responsibilities that prevent you from really being able to travel overseas, we also offer virtual research options. So you can use this kind of technology we're using tonight to undertake your meetings and your fellowship. We had a bit of a chat before we started this webinar, and I think I'd be interested if you're a classroom teacher, for example, and you're thinking, look, I couldn't go for 4 weeks because I just don't have access to that kind of leave. We could consider a hybrid option where you might go for 2 weeks and then you might pick up over a period of time some virtual interviews and meetings, and we'd call that a hybrid approach. So if that's you, I'd encourage you to give us a call. So we're going to have a chat about your circumstances, because I think we're very open to trying to remove some of the barriers that might exist to people undertaking Churchill Fellowships. For people living in very remote parts of Australia, we're also offering domestic travel. So whilst a Churchill Fellowship is predominantly overseas travel, we recognise that there are people living in very remote parts of Australia where travel is challenging, and the experience and benefits latent within Australian travel for those people is huge, and for their community. So we are also offering that for the first time. So Churchill Fellowship is an individual project. It's not a team project. That's important to understand. If you work as part of a team and your team is thinking, why don't we apply for a fellowship? That won't work. We award fellowships to the applicant, not to a team. So please keep that in mind. Collaboration is vital, and you know, if you're a team, one of you is going to have to elect to be the person that does the project. If you're undertaking tertiary studies, that's perfectly fine. However, your project for your fellowship can't form a direct part of that study. So what I mean by that is you can't use a Churchill Fellowship to complete your tertiary studies. We want you to commit 100% to your Churchill Fellowship and what you're learning from that and what you're going to do with that knowledge and those skills when you come back. We want you to be focused on that, not on completing your PhD or whatever it is that you might be doing. So I think keep that in mind. They really can't be the same thing. But I do want you to hear me say that a Churchill Fellowship really is an opportunity for people from all walks of life. And that's so very true for what we do. In terms of your projects that you're thinking about, it needs to be suitable for a Churchill Fellowship. Clearly, one of the things you need to convince us is that there's a benefit to the Australian community in some way by you bringing back and sharing your knowledge, your ideas, your experiences from your fellowship travels. You need to demonstrate that you have fully explored the topic in Australia to be considered. So you're going to need to convince the assessment panel or committee that you can't learn what you're proposing to learn overseas in Australia, because obviously we don't want to pay to send you overseas when you could be learning it here. So you need to be very clear on that up front. A Churchill Fellowship project doesn't need to relate to your employment, but it often does. And I think that's for obvious reasons. People do get quite passionate and knowledgeable in things they work in on a day-to-day basis. And the opportunity to influence or make change when you come back is obviously strong if you're working at the coalface of the issues that your project is about. However, that said, a Churchill Fellowship might be something that relates to something you're doing outside of work and that you're equally passionate about and engaged in, and that's perfectly fine. So it's not a requirement by any means that your project relates to your employment. We don't set the limits on the topics or the issues, and that's really a strength. That's up to you. You choose what your project is about. And I guess following on from that, it really is a bit like a choose your own adventure. You design your project. And that's the beauty of a Churchill Fellowship. If you can think of a suitable topic, there are no limits. We do offer some sponsored fellowships. So these are fellowships usually in the name of someone, and it could be through a bequest, it could be through an organisation or an individual who wants to see people undertake Churchill Fellowships on particular themes or topics. And you can tick a box on the application form saying, hey, please consider me for this sponsored fellowship. That won't exclude you from being considered just for a regular Churchill Fellowship and vice versa. So don't worry about that too much. If you haven't ticked the box and we think, oh, wow, that's a really good fit for this sponsored fellowship, we'll still consider you for the sponsored fellowship. So for example, in the education theme, we have the Blakeney Miller Foundation Churchill Fellowship, which is related to education, health, the environment, specifically for the benefit of Tumut and its immediate surrounds, and that's come from a bequest. So really, to be that's quite a niche one in terms of you need to live in the Tumut immediate area to be eligible. So you know, if that's you, please think about applying. The Park Family Churchill Fellowship, that particular fellowship, what the family is looking for are projects that I guess are really around education and vocational training. So that's a really, really good one, I think very topical right now. There's the Northern Districts Education Centre, and they're looking for school or preschool education related projects, and the Gallagher Bequest, which is for Tasmanian applicants and for projects in education. But beyond that, I would say we're absolutely looking for people to apply on issues related to education in the broadest sense. So please be encouraged by that. So how do you apply? Well, you apply online. Applications will open on 1 March and close on 1 May. Now, all the information you need is easy to find on our website. So if you go to churchillfellowships.com.au, there's a menu button called Become a Fellow. Now, that is where you should start. Everything you need to know is there, except for the application form. That will appear on 1 March, but all the information that you need to start thinking about is available through that website and those pages. Applications can only be made using the online system. It's one of those smart forms where you log in and you can save and come back and save and come back. So you've got plenty of time. The applications don't close to 1 May, so there's plenty of time to work it out. If you can't use the form for some reason, I mean, there might be, we've had in the past people who have a screen reader that isn't compatible with the technology, just contact us. We'll work a way around that for you. We don't want people to be denied applying because they can't use our form. That's the last thing we want. Remember, you'll be competing against all other applicants. So you need to think about how you're going to convince the selectors to invest in you and your project idea. This year, we've got something new. So if you've applied before, which is perfectly fine, not everyone gets success on their first application, you'll be providing a 60-second video pitch. Now, the technology to record that video pitch is all in our form and on our website. So you don't need any other technology than you're using tonight, a camera and a microphone. And that'll be a pitch telling us a bit more about yourself, you know, where you're from, why your project is so important to you and the community, what the benefits you think will be if you're successful. You will need 2 references. So someone who can be a personal reference, vouching for you, your character, and a professional reference, someone who has some understanding of your topic, your proposed project topic, and can talk with some authority about that. Churchill Fellows have told us many times the process of completing the application form allowed them to fine-tune their projects and its implementation on their return. So by that, what they mean is just that process of trying to distill your ideas into an application form with a character count. So that's going to be a challenge. You need to be succinct. You need to be able to edit down to quite I guess, a pointy, sharp set of words. That's really valuable for people. The form's fully automated, as I said. Part of that process is your referees. They'll get an email and a text message, which will alert them to the fact that their referee form is ready. You will have spoken to them and they'll know it's coming. Number 1 tip, think about your referees now. Get on to thinking about who they are, get in touch with them and find out when they're going to be available over the next couple of months. You might be surprised, but probably the number 1 most common panicked phone call we get on the closing date for applications are applicants who don't have the referee reports ready, and they, the referee's on a cruise somewhere, no phone, no email. Well, it's too late, to be honest. By that day, the applications are closed and we can't provide extensions because we need to go into assessing. So, now it's today, the 15th of February, you've got plenty of time. Get in touch with people who might be your referees, make sure that they're around, and don't forget to harass them to complete your reference. So that's a really important piece of advice. It might sound simple, but it's probably the best advice I can give many of you. The second tip, which I think is also quite obvious, is don't leave your application to the last minute. Very easy to think, well, it's not due till 1 May, I'll push it down the road. But really, your best work will be the work that you start early. So just a bit more, I guess, insight into the application itself and the thinking you need to do. You'll be expected to put forward an itinerary. So whether it's 4 to 8 weeks, you'll need to say, I want to go to, whatever the city is in the country, who you want to meet with, the organisation of the person, how long you think you might be there, and we ask you to do increments of half a week in each destination, and what you hope to do there. Interview someone, observe something, attend a course, whatever it is. So you need to set out a plan, which is the exciting bit, right? So you sort of, where do I want to go? Who am I going to see? Now, what you don't need to do is lock in meetings with those people. We don't expect you to have contacted them and said, look, I'm doing this application. I want to travel to your country, maybe in, 10 months or whatever, and will you meet with me? You don't need to do that. You just need to work out who it is that you want to meet with. It's up to you if you want to sort of do some exploratory work to find out, do they accept visiting, researchers or people. That's something you could do, but you don't need to lock in meetings by any means. It's important that you put a full itinerary in, because you'll be assessed based on that itinerary. And you'll be asked questions about, well, why are you going here? Why are you meeting them? What do you want to do there? What do you hope to learn? So you need to have all that very clear. You also need to not jam-pack your itinerary. So don't try and go to 16 countries in 4 weeks. You probably won't get shortlisted anyway. But if you did, imagine trying to explain an interview how you're going to undertake that much work. One often overlooked aspect of a Churchill Fellowship is the opportunity to experience the culture that you're in, to understand that context of what you're observing, what you're learning. So we encourage people to pack in a bit of time in the itinerary, have a weekend, be a tourist, be available for meetings you didn't expect to get, because they'll happen. So don't cram your itinerary. Think about what are the best places to go and focus on those. Don't try and pad it out. I think that's what I'm trying to say. You also don't need to worry about costing your flight to your accommodation or any of those things. We cost that out. You just work out where you want to go. We'll worry about the cost of that. So in terms of the selection process, we have selection committees and panels in each state and territory, comprising people who are well experienced in different fields and sectors. And in the larger states of New South Wales and Victoria, we actually have selection panels who do the first round of assessing and interviews, and then there'll be a committee that does the final interviews. So what you'll find is those panels will be focused on particular subject matter areas like health or education or arts, whatever it might be. That said, I'd encourage you, another tip, don't use jargon. Just use plain English. Just assume that the people assessing aren't deep experts in something you're a deep expert in. Try and use plain language where possible. If you have to use technical language, explain what it is. Applications will be shortlisted, taking into account the referee comments. So your referees have to be done before the closing date because they form part of your application. The website selection process will be up online on our website with the dates for interviews. All the interviews are going to be held through June and July, and those dates will be made available to you. We have a staff member in each state and territory who is called a regional secretary. They'll be your contact once you've submitted your application. They'll let you know what's happening with the assessment, where you're up to in the process. If you have an interview, they'll work with you on the dates and times, those sorts of things. So this year, something pretty exciting and new is we're going to be bringing all of these successful applicants into Canberra for an onboarding process, which is, partly about becoming part of that network of 100 people from across Australia. It's building new networks. It's doing some formal training on stakeholder mapping, really setting you up to get the most out of your fellowship. So it'll be a full day, of work and networking, but I think that's going to be highly valuable. So again, I'm always asked for tips about that application process. And, another good tip is to read and address the selection criteria. There you go. What a surprise. But honestly, if you read and address the selection criteria, be clear, be succinct, that's not a bad start. So speaking of the selection criteria, we kind of, have two halves to the application that we consider. And one half is your project. We want to know what's compelling about your project. If there's a burning platform, like why is now the best time to do it? Make that really clear in your application. Specifically, how will the new knowledge and skills that you receive or you gain, how will that benefit the community? Who will it benefit and why? As I said, your itinerary needs to show the need to travel overseas. Have a really clear focus. I want to go and see this, this, and this. This is why. Achievability. We want to actually believe that your project is achievable. So that's important. Have a really clear idea of what you can do when you come back with that knowledge. How, is it possible for you to make some kind of influence, whether it's to a system or a pilot or whatever it is. And then the second half of the selection criteria we look at is you, the person. So why you? How can you convince us that you're the right person to undertake this project? How are you best placed to come back and implement change or influence others? We always say an article in a professional journal sounds great, but it's not worth, upwards of $30,000, which a Churchill Fellowship is. We expect you to have a really good plan beyond writing one journal article of how you're going to communicate and disseminate your findings and what you're going to do to create some kind of impact. And look, you might not have all the answers, but you need to have a bit of a plan and be able to convince the selection committee of that. You're expected to create a report on your return, and it needs to be of good quality. It doesn't have to be written. It can be a podcast or a video if you're creative and if that's a really good way to share your findings. But ultimately, it needs to tell the story of where you went, what you learnt, what your observations were. How did you synthesize that information into something for the Australian context? What are your recommendations? And importantly, what are you going to do about it? So it's not just a project where you go away, come back and tick the box and you're done. You'll be expected to, and I'm sure you'll want to, continue to do good work in the space of your project. So just to be clear, it's not a funded overseas junket or a holiday. It's an absolute investment in you and your passion and your energy. So keep that in mind and don't be shy. You should apply. So remember, it is a very competitive process. Churchill Fellowships are prestigious, they're well funded, they're highly contested, but that's not a reason for you to be shy. It's a reason to put effort into your application. You'll be competing against everyone else who lodges an application, and I'm sure most people will address the selection criteria, but it's how well you address it that's going to make the difference. We do want to see your passion, your belief in the issue you're researching, and your belief in yourself, and that will make your application stand out. We've got a small team here in Canberra who are available to provide advice, so you can call the office and, I might answer the phone, anyone will. We're a small team and we're very happy to have a chat with you about your questions in relation to the process. So on that note, in case you don't have it, there's our office number, there's our website, and I'm now going to introduce our first Churchill Fellow for the evening, Anita Collins. And Anita also hails from Canberra. Anita is an educator working with school children through to teachers, politicians, school leaders, and decision makers. And while her research expertise is highly specialised in the field of music learning and brain development, and I'm sure some of you have read some of Anita's stuff, her professional expertise is highly generalised in looking at how music learning can enhance human performance. And her work looks to bridge the gap between neuroscience and psychology research and the practice of teaching music, as well as to challenge and improve our understanding of how we learn and the practice of educators at every point in human development. In 2022, Anita was also, in addition to being a Churchill Fellow, a recipient of the Trust Impact Funding Program, and she's going to talk a bit about that, and that's a pretty exciting thing we're now offering Churchill Fellows as well. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Anita.
Thank you, Adam, and hello to everyone who's out there, particularly the educators who have just finished, a lovely Wednesday at school. I'm just going to share my screen, mainly to keep me on track. There we go. So just briefly about my trip, what I've learned, things to think about. I went on my trip in 2016 and it was the Barbara Matthews Churchill Fellowship. So it's a named fellowship. And it was to investigate music programs and neuroscience labs. It had come out of the fact that I am a high school teacher, but I was also teaching in teacher education at the University of Canberra, and I had finished my PhD in neuroscience and music education. Basically, what I was interested in is, it was as simple as, if I understood what was going on in the brains of my students, maybe I could be a better teacher. And what I found was a field of research that fascinated me, but also I could see applications to not just music education, but all learning. It could help enhance what we were doing. So I had been lucky enough to write a TED education video. It's the short animated one, which had done it's been shared millions and millions and millions of times. And I'd also been a TEDx speaker. And that kind of set me up to go, you know what, I think there's something in this. But until that point, because I'm here in Australia, I had only been able to read the published research of these researchers. And anyone who's a researcher would know, basically, they only publish about 10% of what they do. And also as an educator, while reading's great, I learn best when I'm immersed in something and I get to understand what's going on. So that's why I chose to apply. It's like, how can I get to that experience of immersing myself in these labs? And these labs are in the US, in Canada, there's a couple in Germany, but they're overseas. So this is why I looked to the Churchill Fellowship for my trip, in order to just have the opportunity to go and spend time at these labs. But also I spent time with music programs that were using the neuroscientific research for their advocacy, but also to inform how they taught music. I went to the Harmony Project in the US, that in LA, that works it's a gang reduction program. Basically, music doesn't come into it till page 15, because they're using the science to talk about how they can rewire the brains of kids who are living in challenging circumstances. My highlight was the access. Honestly, I'd never spoken to these researchers. They were gods to me. And by writing and saying I've received this prestigious sort of fellowship, can I please come and spend 4 days in your lab? And every single one of them immediately wrote back and said, absolutely, you can. So it provided me with that access. I was able to be immersed in these labs and in these music programs. I had the most extraordinary days watching the experiments being done. I did as many experiments as they would let me do, and they got to look at my own brain, and all they said it was interesting. And it also brought me a bit of clarity on what it is I wanted to do with all of this knowledge that I had amassed and then wanted to share, but had to find a way to do it. My most surprising experience for my trip, which is Canada, I kind of bopped across Canada and then, bopped across the US and went up to Canada, is that I very quickly realized that the dreams I had for what I wanted to do were nowhere near big enough. And nothing would have given me that clarity and that understanding more than being placed in the situation and going, you know what, I can do something with this and I can benefit all education and therefore all students in Australia if I can come back and find a way to share this research in a way that departments of education, schools, systems, anyone can apply it into their schools. Since I've returned, it's the point of my life where everything shifted. And I came back, it didn't shift straight away, but I can now sort of work it backwards and go, you know what, it was the Churchill experience that made me move to where I am now. And what was so important is I've changed jobs. I've moved out of tertiary education. I still am a high school teacher, but only a very small amount. And I basically am an educational consultant and an advocate for music education, involved in some very, very large, statewide projects, South Australian music education strategies, informed by the research that I got to go and come to understand when I was with the researchers, and many, many other things around Australia and also overseas as well. So again, that research I had on the Churchill Fellowship has gone to inform the Scottish Music Education Manifesto, which has meant that every single child in Scotland will have their music education paid for by the state. So it can reach further than you think. Music education is upfront, and a lot of that has to do with what I learned, but also the challenge of just going, you know what, dream bigger. So some of you may have seen the ABC Don't Stop the Music documentary, based on a lot of the experiences I had, but also helping the production company and the ABC to understand the power of music and then how we can talk about that on television. Best thing about the Churchill for me, dream big, don't be scared. And it's important to give back. And I don't just mean to Churchill Fellows and the Churchill Trust, but to everybody, to actually say, you know what, I was given an opportunity and I had a whole bunch of very, very learned and wonderful people who believed in me and gave me this opportunity. And they gave me this opportunity to be an Australian overseas and to come back and to fulfill that within Australia. So that is very, very strong within me now because of that experience. For the application, the thing I think it is it needs to be the right places that you're going at the right time and the right project, and you being the right person. It has to come at this serendipitous point where the Churchill Trust can invest in you to go overseas and to do and learn and immerse yourself and do something amazing, and then come back and figure out what you can do with that. And again, think big. And it's a pretty special group of people to be involved with. And as Adam mentioned, I've recently there's been a second round of what's called impact funding from the Churchill Trust. And that basically is allowing me to pilot a project that will help every school principal around Australia to evaluate their music programs and figure out how to improve them so that the cognitive development is there for every child. And that could never have happened if I didn't have this opportunity, and if I didn't have a group believing in me, but also I gave back as well to say, how can I improve? What can I make better? What can be my legacy in many ways? And being just a music teacher, is the just part has gone. I'm now a music educator, and that's a really important role within Australia for me. So I think those are my main findings or my main things about the Churchill Fellowship. I could go on for hours, but I'll leave it there. Thanks, Adam.
Awesome. Thanks, Anita. Right place, right time, right person. That's a great way to describe it. Thank you. Very good. All right. I will now introduce our second Churchill Fellow speaker, Ganga Fraser, who is from Tasmania. And Ganga is a passionate and thoughtful educator who is highly committed to ensuring all students, regardless of their background, have access to quality education, and that schools use the most effective programs to bridge learning gaps. She's done some pretty amazing things at that local level. And Ganga, you might want to turn your camera on now. She's passionate about addressing one of Tasmania's greatest challenges, raising literacy and numeracy rates. And Ganga is currently head of Ellicos, the Hutchins School, Sandy Bay, Tasmania. And between 2014 and 2019, Ganga was head of teaching and learning at Dominic College in Glenorchy. Ganga has a Bachelor of Teaching, Secondary Education, Bachelor of Commerce, and a graduate certificate in TESOL ESL from the University of Tasmania. So lifelong learning there as well. And she also has a Master of Education from the University of Southern Queensland. So Ganga, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Is that working? Yes. Can you all hear me? I'm hoping, Adam, you can hear me. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Ganga from Tasmania. I'd like to start by thanking the Churchill Trust and the Gallagher family for giving me this wonderful opportunity. I was awarded the Churchill Fellowship in 2018 and embarked on my journey of learning in October 2019. So I undertook my fellowship with the aim of investigating and evaluating interventions from around the world that have improved the literacy and numeracy outcomes in disadvantaged areas, predominantly for middle school students. My journey began in Finland, of course. Most educationalists cite Finland as the epitome of excellence and a world leader in progressive education. So that's where I started my journey. So over the course of 7.5 weeks, I spoke with educators, leaders, and teachers in Finland, the UK, the US, and Canada, with the goal of just gaining some insights into how successful programs could be implemented within my community, so in Tasmania. I visited schools, looked at various intervention models and programs, both in and out of school, Saturday learning, and even summer learning programs. So one of the main highlights for me was attending the Summer Learning Conference in Atlanta, where I was able to gain an understanding of innovative practices that schools and organizations have used and trialed to improve literacy and numeracy outcomes within their community. So I was able to speak to a range of people who confirmed my ideas on creating a summer learning program, which was my intention. My conversations with them also reinforced that our long summer months in Tasmania present as an opportunity to engage with and provide high quality summer programs and support systems for our families. So, however, engaging students, that's a different issue. So we need to ensure that we are quite innovative with our practices so that we're quite different from being in a traditional school setting. So as a result of attending the conference and collaborating with key stakeholders, I encountered a number of teaching and educational models that can be applied within the Tasmanian context. I also want to quickly touch on a few things. I talked about the Summer Learning Conference. The next thing I'm going to just touch on briefly is OISE, which is the Ontario Institute of Education. So literacy and numeracy success in young people is really a nexus between high quality teacher training, ongoing teacher professional development, and a relentless focus on student outcomes. So this is a particular reason why I chose to have a look at OISE, to look at their teacher training programs. For future Churchill Fellows, please take note. this topic is a fellowship on its own. I only dabbled in it very briefly just to see what they were doing. So I visited the Dr. Eric Jackman Institute of Child Study Lab. So it's basically a school within the university from nursery to year 6. I was impressed with how it contributes directly to academic work of the university, linking education theory with practice, and especially with pre-service teachers. I then made my way to Saturday school, which they coined as the 6th day of learning. The Saturday school runs classes for 3 hours in the morning. So on Saturdays, teachers pre-teach a concept, help students learn so that they can achieve mastery. Most teachers are certified and teach within a district, and they also know the students that they're teaching, which is great. The district also supports the students by paying for their transport. The building site and breakfast is also offered to students. So they come to school for 3 hours on Saturdays. So this keeps the cost low, and it also enables parents to send their children to these sessions, which was quite impressive. Finally, tips. I talk about tips. It's basically, I met this young person named Matt Hathaway. He's the founder of TIPS, Teachers in the Parks program. That's exactly what it is. So I met him at the Summer Learning Conference to discuss his summer program. Matt is an innovative educator. He started TIPS in 2004 when he realized that some of his students wanted extra tuition in maths and science. So as you can imagine, as a science teacher, he decided to meet these students at the park. As soon as he was telling me his experience, I kind of went, really? After school in a park with a bunch of kids? Okay. I mean, look, it's a great location for science activity. So during his time at the park with them, he also noticed that they could benefit from extra tuition. So simple activities that moved from, just targeted reading and maths right through to science lessons. And in 2009, a school district was so impressed that they adopted TIPS to fill in the gaps for their summer learning loss, which was great. So, he talks about summer learning did with fun, interactive programs, and they're taught by educators within that community. So this is a great innovative model. And there's also a lot of research that shows that, a large amount of reading and math skills over the summer without continued practice, kids do dip. So I'm not sure if I'm going to trial that in Tassie, but it's given me some food for thought. So I guess in rounding up the highlights in my travel and what I've learned, over 7.5 weeks, I also realized that no one has a silver bullet to the challenges that we face. Summer programs are not the whole answer to Tasmania's literacy and numeracy challenges, but I believe that it can contribute to one part of the solution. This is something that I'm hoping to relaunch as COVID threw a spanner in the works. For me, I came back in, November 2019, and then we got hit by it. So I'm actually really excited to relaunch what I've learned and start things moving again very quickly. So being a Churchill Fellow, what does that mean? Look, getting a Churchill Fellowship is a prestigious award. I was able to travel abroad, explore my topic of interest. Personally, for me, it's been a transformative experience, as cliche as that sounds. I was able to gain new insights, skills and perspectives. I loved being part of a local community where I could meet with experts, professionals, and talk about, I guess, pedagogical practices and discourses and innovative strategies. You also get to collaborate and build new global networks and share your experiences, which is something I really appreciate. So I've come back home and I'm in LinkedIn groups, a WhatsApp group where we share our findings and also challenge some of our assumptions in education, which has been very healthy. And the best part for me about being a Churchill Fellow is I believe it's helped with my self-confidence. I've grown both professionally and personally as well. Since I've been back, I've also reported my presentation, presented to some groups and been involved in some media interviews as well. Finally, the process. Now, this is the fun part. Get started on your application now, exactly what Adam said. I think I need to also echo what Adam said about the references. I had a little bit of a panic attack when mine, it was looming to the end of, application date, and they hadn't received one of my referee reports. It was done, of course, but yeah, so if you can get onto it ASAP, try and get a rough itinerary in place. Make sure you build in some rest and reflection time, because that's really important so you don't burn out. Reflection time was really important for me during my journey. I would record all my interviews. I think I've got 60 interviews recorded. I didn't want to sit down and take notes, so that really helped me just to kind of go back and think about, did that person really say this, or just to fact check and maybe have a different perspective as well. Be very flexible with your itinerary as well, and be available, because you never know. One meeting could lead to another. Churchill Fellows are here to help you, so reach out to us. If we can help, we would love to help you achieve this, because like I said, it's a prestigious fellowship, and be excited and passionate about your project, because that's really what's going to get you through the line. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ganga. That was a great presentation, and I might ask if you could just stop sharing your screen. Excellent. Cool. All right. So they were hopefully inspiring presentations, and I've been lucky enough to talk at length with Ganga and Anita about their work, and I think some of you are familiar with their work. And look, now we have a few questions, and I did answer some whilst our presenters were speaking, and I'll go back over those. But if Ganga and Anita, if you like turning your cameras back on, you can participate in this. And there are some great comments. Yay, another music teacher, go Anita. So that's that's positive. We do like music teachers. And now, if you're unsuccessful in applying, do you receive feedback on why not? Now, that is one thing that is a challenge for us as a small organisation with volunteers. So we can't provide detailed personal feedback. We do have a page on our website which we update regularly with the kind of top feedback items for people, the things that they can work on. So I would suggest even before you apply, have a look at that. That will be quite useful to think about. And there's nothing wrong with applying more than once. So, there are quite a few fellows that say they got their fellowship on their second, sometimes third application. Honestly, sometimes your application was awesome. And if you got to interview, you really stood out. We just can't give one to everyone. And it might just be that year, yours was awesome, but just not the most awesome. And the competition was fierce. And it could be that the following year, yours is the heads and shoulders above everyone else's. It really does vary from year to year in terms of the people who apply and the projects and the timing. Fabulous, Anita, congratulations, another one. Now, there's a couple of questions which I'll get back to. Someone else has seen Don't Stop the Music documentary, which is great. Someone's asked what makes the right person. Now, I did try and cover that off a little bit, and I wonder if Ganga or Anita, would either of you like to just throw your thoughts to what makes the right person?
I guess. Oh, sorry.
You go, Ganga.
Sure. I guess for me, you just need to be really passionate about what your project is and what you believe in. I think the passion will show potential panel members as well, that this is something that you'll see through, and it's a learning journey as well.
I think for me, it's about positioning yourself to be that person who has done, I know for me, there was a few things that I'd done previously that kind of placed me in this unique space. And therefore that helped support the idea that I was the right person to continue this on, so that I could then bring back the research. And mine is it's a very specialised field. I used to get into lifts and people would say, what are you doing on your PhD? And you'd say neuroscience and music education. And they go, oh, oh, and then they wouldn't talk to me anymore because it's so specialized. But part of it was that I was in this special niche, and I'd done some other things like the TED work beforehand, and I'd done a lot of interviews and a lot of other TV stuff as well, that placed me in that position of like, right, you're the right person to make this leap into the next step. So that was just my personal journey.
Look, and this might sound a bit twee, or, we always say the passion is kind of the secret sauce that comes into who the right person is. And, I'm lucky enough that I attend a lot of the interviews every year, and you absolutely can tell by just hearing someone speak about what they're proposing, that if they're passionate, it's just oozing out of them, and they're the right person. You just know from listening to someone. So to get you across the line to an interview, you need to have a really clear way of explaining what you want to do. Referees need to be supportive, obviously. And this year, as I said, there's a video pitch. That'll help, I think, some people who maybe can't get that sense of passion about through the written words, they'll be able to get it out through a video. And someone did ask the question, is that 60-second video pitch, like, does that need to be part of the process? It is part of the application process this year. If there's some reason why that really, really can't happen, give us a call. Like, I don't want someone to be excluded because I can't think of the reason right now, but if there's a reason, but this is the way technology works. There will be an interview, whether it's in person or like this over Zoom or something. It's going to form part of it, and I think it will help a lot of people. Another question: the previous fellows that are sharing their travels today have both travelled to developed countries. Acknowledging the previous advice about travel warnings, have any previous fellows gone to developing countries to learn from alternative programs? Look, absolutely, probably not enough. Like, I don't want people going dangerous places, but the UK, Canada, the US, New Zealand, get it, makes sense. There's a lot of similarities in governance and systems and things, but man, there are a lot of things you can learn from other developing countries. I'd love to see people with some more diverse countries, and people do it, but more would be great. We can provide some support for language translators, for example. So don't be shy of going to a country where maybe language barrier will be a challenge, and it will be a challenge. But that's what a Churchill Fellowship's all about. It's about rising to the challenge and taking it front on. So I hope that answers that question. Must the fellow return within the 8 weeks or the 4 to 8 weeks that they take? What if they wanted to extend their trip but under their own funds? Is it possible? Absolutely, that's possible. So you might just say, wow, what an opportunity to take a holiday because I'm already overseas and maybe my family will come and meet me. Yeah, great. That's really fine. That's, again, like I said, it's not a grant program monitored by the government. This is a very empowering thing. You're all adults. If you want to do that, sounds fantastic, and you're able to do that. As you say, at your expense, that's not a problem. Sometimes people, they really want to go beyond the 8 weeks and keep doing a few more meetings. That's also possible if you want to fund that as well. Is there an interest in adult professional education, developing leaders for good? I hope so. I really do. Yeah, I think we mean it when we say we don't set a limit on the topic. We don't guide that. That sounds absolutely like a good thing. So I think if you talk to someone in your network or your neighbor or, and say, hey, this is this thing that I'm really passionate about and I think we can make a difference, and they're going, yeah, that sounds good, then, that's a pretty good indication that we're going to think it sounds good. In terms of the budgeting and logistics, I did mention that the trust does the costings. Does that mean that flight accommodation bookings are managed by the trust, or is there room for negotiation and preferencing? So how it works is it's fully funded by us. So you get travel insurance, your flights, your internal travel. So for the travel component, we have currently got Flight Centre Management, FCM. You book through them. So you get that kind of professional service. You book it through that service provider. With regards to your living allowance and your accommodation, we calculate that based on where you're going, how long you're going, the exchange rate, those sorts of things. And then you get that fund given to you. You book your own accommodation. You can choose. Again, you might say, look, I really want I've got the funds and I want to top it up and stay at 5-star hotels, well, that's up to you if you want to do that. You might think, look, I just want to try and look for some more affordable accommodation, and I've got family in another country and they're going to let me stay with them. Great. And we're not going to say give us the money back. You know, you can use that money towards something else on your fellowship, or some sightseeing, or buy them a gift, or whatever. That's up to you. So I hope that answers that question. Is a trust amenable to multi or interdisciplinary projects, ones that span education, arts, history, cultural study? Absolutely, and we do. We do. Now, the next question you'll come up with is, well, which box do I tick in my application? Because you put these categories of health or education. Just pick the one that you think is the most relevant. That's all I can say. If our selection panels in the bigger states look at it and the arts panel goes, I reckon this is more of an education thing, we should get the education people to eyeball it, then they can do that. That, you know, we'll make sure that it gets its best assessment possible, but don't lose any sleep about which category to put it in. A lot of projects do cross over, and that's perfectly fine. Is it difficult to demonstrate the value of the Churchill investment if you don't work in your area of inquiry? Look, I don't think it's necessarily difficult. That's really up to you. So you might be a volunteer in, you know, homeless kind of issues at night, on the weekends, whatever it is, and you might have great networks there and really good opportunities to influence and impact, and that's not related to your work. That will be okay. So no, I think that's really up to you and your circumstances as to whether or not you can demonstrate that value. Next question is, can the education section focus on students specifically, or more so being an educator and building new curriculum? So look, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but that, again, that's up to you. I mean, you tell us about what you want your project to focus on. Certainly that's your call. Ganga, you might have a thought there in relation to your project.
Sorry, Adam, could you repeat that question?
So they're asking about whether the education section focus on students specifically, or can it be or more?
Well, I did. I pivoted. Yeah. I mean, you've got to have a broad perspective as well, which is why I looked at teacher training, even though that wasn't part of my brief, but it gave me a bit of an overview. So it's always good to kind of pivot, get a holistic view, and then come back. But make sure you come back to your topic.
Yeah. And I think it's good. So it could be really detailed practitioner level implementation things, or it could be strategic curriculum building. It could be a bit of both, and it doesn't matter. We're not looking for a particular thing here. You're going to come to us with your amazing thoughts and ideas, and we're going to support it. That's the idea.
Yeah.
So someone else has written, they're looking at education gaps they've identified coming from a youth work background, and they're an early career teacher with many years of experience with disengaged youth and education. Would a combination of both passions be of benefit? Well, it sounds like it. Absolutely, yeah. So, you know, I think I'm feeling a bit of maybe people thinking, really, could this be on anything? You know, could the Churchill Fellowship be for my area of interest? The answer is yes. You know, could it be on insert your idea here? Yes, I think it could be. I've yet to come across an idea, unless it was something particularly offensive, you know, to our community or against the law, where I'd say, oh, I don't think it could be on that. You know, we have people doing Italian patisserie, we have people doing stone ladder carving, we have tinsmiths, we have brain surgeons. Literally, like, you'd just be blown away by the types of projects that we support. So, you know, if you are really passionate and you see the benefit to the community and what you're doing, then it sounds like it will be a good project. So hopefully that's given that person some encouragement there. Someone wanted to know if it's possible to speak to fellows from their area of interest, like health, for example, for specific tips. And someone else also asked if they could connect with Ganga and Anita. So the answer there is absolutely yes. Probably the best way to do it is go to our website. Every Churchill Fellow has a profile page. You can search by name or go to the Fellows and Projects and search by health or whatever the category is. And if you see someone who looks, you know, you went, oh, I'd like to talk to them, there's a contact form, and that contact form, you fill it out with your details and say, I'd like to get in touch with so-and-so, and we'll make the connection for you. I've yet to see a fellow that says, I don't want to talk to anyone. They're great people to talk to and always very keen to support applicants. We also have alumni associations in each state and territory comprising Churchill Fellows who volunteer their time to support fellows and further the whole Churchill Fellowship community, and they're great people to talk to get tips as well. So absolutely. This is a tricky one. How many hours would you recommend us to spend on an application? Anita, how many hours do you think you spent on your application?
Probably, I don't know. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. So what I did is I went to the application and I found all the parts of it and just basically read through all the sections. And then I went away and I think I ruminated on it for maybe 2 weeks. It was constantly in my head and I'm going, what could I do? What would I want to do? What would advance what I'm trying to do now? And then what I did is I wrote it in a Word document and I actually shared it with a few friends and I went, this is what I'm thinking. And they were really good because they showed me that I didn't get to the point quick enough. So they often took away my first couple of sentences and then went, this is your point. And they did that. And that process really helped me to then go, okay, then all I did was kind of copied and pasted back into the online one, but I sort of had that drafting. But the most importantly was the thinking. So I can't put an hour amount on it, because once I got to writing it, it didn't take very long, but it's because I'd done all the thinking first and I'd thought through, and I read lots of stuff on the website about what the Churchill Trust was about, and to really figure out if it was the right thing for me. So I can't say in a number of hours, it depends what your process is, but I think getting help, writing it out first, but deeply thinking about it was important for me.
And Ganga? Similar?
Yeah, very similar. I think it took me a couple of weeks. So I was thinking about it the whole time and refining the process, and especially your topic as well. You have to be quite succinct, is what you said, Adam, earlier, because if you go too broad, you can go anywhere with it. So you really need to be really clear about what you want to go and find out and how you're going to, implement it when you come back home.
Yeah, look, and I've spoken to people who've applied and not been successful in getting a fellowship, but they said, look, the process was really useful for them, just working through their own work they're doing, and they've gone on and done other things. And in some of those cases, they've come back a couple of years later and applied for a Churchill Fellowship and been successful. But they said the process of initially going, right, what is it that I'm doing? How do I articulate that and boil it down? Has been really, really helpful. So I guess we're not putting a number of hours on it, but that gives you a bit of a sense of that. Someone's asked, when designing your itinerary, is it okay to leave around 2 days a week for a reflection and flexibility? Unexpected meetings? It absolutely is. Like, we would encourage that, please. You get a weekend now. We don't want you working 7 days a week, and it's work. Doing these meetings, meeting new people, it's stressful, it's exciting, it's hiring, it's all those things. You do need to allow yourself to have time for reflection. Anita?
I was just as if it's a helpful thing, my itinerary tended to work out that I would be wherever I was on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Tuesday to Friday. Then I'd have the weekend wherever I was, and then I always designated Monday as the travel day. So the travel day was the day I got to the next place. So I went to 4 different places and I kind of worked it that way. And I think it was the right thing to do because it allowed me that space, to spend whatever time I needed to in the work I was doing. But the travel day also took away the stress of trying to get to somewhere else. And because I was also traveling long distances, if something went wrong, it was okay. There was nothing I missed. So I think treating it like work is actually a good way to do it.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let's keep going through. So we've got a little bit of time. Anonymous attendee is asked, Ganga mentioned attending a conference. So is that an acceptable use of time and dollars as part of the itinerary? So look, It is. You apply, when you apply, there is space to put in what we call a fee request, and you might say, look, there is a conference that I would like to attend. It's, you know, €1,000 or whatever, and you can then upload the form. Ganga can tell us more about
And I
that.
guess for me, attending this conference, I really wanted to look at summer school and summer models, and it's actually a summer school conference. So leaders and organizations and policymakers from all over America congregated at one spot. So that really saved me time. And I was able to meet with lots of people, like Matt Hathaway, for example. I would never have been able to go to him because he was too far for me to connect with. So that conference hit the nail on the head for me. And I was, you know, it was just fortuitous, really, in a sense that, yeah, I was able to attend it at the time that I was going as well. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thanks. Anonymous is also, or another anonymous, I don't know if it's the same person. How do you feel about 600 to 900 people spending hours on applications and they're not even receiving feedback from it? Is it too competitive? So I guess I'll take that as directed to me. How do I feel about it? Look, I'd love to give every single applicant lots of detailed feedback about the application. We just can't, we're not big enough. We've got volunteers that spend time assessing these applications and going through it. So look, we just can't do that for everyone. So I feel it would be good, but I also know that we just can't, it's not possible. That said, that's why we spend time, you know, adding to that feedback we've got on our website, which is the common areas that people need to improve on. And I think that usually applies to probably 90% of the applicants that aren't successful. So I'd recommend reading through that. Someone has asked if you could add supporting documentation to visually highlight the proposal. No, you can't. So you'll be, maybe you can wave it quickly in your 60-second pitch if you think it's that important, but really, no. If you get an interview and there's a, like, I mean, and I say that because like a PDF, what is that, a 100-page document? We can't, our assessors can't be reading mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains of material for applications. It would simply take all year for us to get through it. So if there's something really critical in that document, you know, maybe you can refer to it and say, you know, if you're interested, read this document, this book or whatever it is, to find out more about it, but you can't attach it to your application. Sometimes people bring in things to their interview. You can't leave it with the assessors, but you can maybe hand it around, and it might be a diagrammatic thing that kind of makes people really understand what you're talking about. So I hope that's helpful. Someone anonymous again has asked, do your applications take into account affirmative action? So having an equitable approach to applicants on diverse backgrounds. Look, I would have to say we do. We don't have an affirmative action policy in the sense of we've set specific numbers of fellowships to award to people from different backgrounds, but we absolutely have been very actively trying to ensure that people from all walks of life are recognised. So in terms of you know, gender equity, it's absolutely for the last 6 years, I think we're seeing 65% female applicants, and then about exactly that in terms of awarded. Last year, I think almost 10% of our fellowship recipients, First Nations people who have identified disability. That's incredible, the number of people now not only being awarded but identifying. And in my previous roles, which have involved kind of HR responsibilities, I know that it's really low in terms of the numbers of people willing to disclose. But I think because we are very open in terms of the support we provide, that is providing a safer space for people to put those things forward. You know, this year we've translated our applicant information, promoting the round into about, I think, 10 languages. That's something we haven't done before, but we're absolutely wanting to encourage more cultural diversity in terms of applicants. So, you know, we're, I think, fairly active in that space, if that's helpful. And then there must be some sort of auditing process. I'll take that as maybe related to the above. So yes, we do look very closely at all aspects of the diversity of our applicants and awarded, and including, you know, where they come from in Australia, you know, geographically, regional, remote, very remote, metropolitan. We really are quite focus on that. So it's a good question. Is there interest in social justice training / pedagogy? It sounds like it. And absolutely, if you do a search on our website, there's a search bar on the top. You can put in a keyword like pedagogy or social justice or whatever, and it'll come up. It'll show you some fellows that have done work in the area. That's really a really cool search engine. It works very well. So I'd suggest have a look at that. You might be surprised. So another question about conferences, recognising that we allow up to $2,000 to attend a conference. Why are conferences set apart in the funding? Well, they're set apart because we want to make sure that you get to go on it. And so we fund that in addition. So if you didn't put a conference in, we don't fund you up to $2,000. You fund $0 because you're not going to one. So it's us trying to make sure that's something that can be done. I would say though, and you know, you won't be successful if your application purely looks like an opportunist who wants to go on a conference junket. So don't say, you know, don't list, here's 6 conferences I want to go to, unless you've got a really compelling reason why that will be an incredible Churchill Fellowship experience. Usually a conference is just happens to be something that fits in really nicely, like with Ganga. That will be really great to go. But yeah, just make sure it's not a conference tour of the world. And it's okay to speak at one. So that happens too, by the way. So sometimes people say, it's amazing, I'm going to this conference as part of my fellow, and they've asked me if I'll speak at it. And it's like, great, why not? So think about that. Think big. If you're going to go to an international conference, be one of the keynote speakers. Beatboxing in the music classroom as a revolutionary form of expression. What do you reckon, team? Sounds pretty cool to me. In fact, we only about 5 years ago, we had a New South Wales fellowship recipient who was teaching kids rap and DJing and beatboxing and things like that. He was working with young people at risk. Yes, absolutely. It sounds like a fun topic. So again, we're running out of time now. Some thanks for Ganga and Anita for the informative session. I think we've got some excited people looking forward to applying. Someone wanted to know about if they can create a commercial or social enterprise as an outcome. Hey, why not? Sounds great. We're all about impact here. If you can make something of your fellowship, that's fantastic. Absolutely. I'm just quickly flicking through because we're about to finish up. If a person applies and is unsuccessful and doesn't get feedback, do we recommend they reapply under the same topic to indicate a passion, or should they consider changing it? Look, you know the answer to that question. If you're thinking, I've got 25 different ideas, which one's the strongest? Maybe you need to spend some more time finding your calling and your passion. If you really know strongly in your heart that you want a fellowship on this particular topic, you'll apply for it again the next time, and you probably would have done a bit more in that year or 2 years between applying as well. So I think that's going to become pretty clear to you. Fellowships are assessed as a form of income by the tax office. So that's a good question, but you can offset. So you keep all your receipts, and there's lots of great apps for that. So you keep all the receipts and you can claim the deductions for your expenses. So that's a pretty good question, whoever asked that. Someone's towards the end of the career, an older person, will it be a disadvantage? Not necessarily. Look, we've awarded fellowships to people in their 70s. You know, if you've got a compelling case and you've probably got a heck of a lot of experience, so you'll be able to, you know, sell that. How am I going to do something with this when I get back? I think that shouldn't go against you at all. Okay, so sometimes people take their kids with them and their family. Sometimes people escape their kids and their family and leave them here. So that's a very personal question for you, and it's expensive as well. Even though you've already got your own funds for your fellowship, it does cost more to take your family with you. I'm going to keep going. If I understand that people need to leave, but there's just a few more questions. Will there be a disadvantage if your project lens is informed politically by things like anti-racism? No, not at all. You know, we have people looking at refugees, highly, you know, political over the years. Topics, no, it won't be disadvantaged at all. We're very much apolitical. We're about things that are benefiting the community. So someone's asked if the questions are available prior to 1 March. There is a guide. Go on, become a fellow, read all that stuff that's there. You'll be very well informed if you do that. Hope someone's granddaughter's turned off her computer or her computer 3 times. Sorry about that. Oh, and that was Mark Robertson from New South Wales. Melinda, gold star for you. You know about that fellow I mentioned who works with at-risk youth. Thank you. Is it possible to go overseas and train with a recognised master in an arts area? Yes, it absolutely is. We've had someone just come back who she learnt how to make wigs for movies, and she went to someone that does that in the UK. I was very focused. I mentioned Italian patisserie. I can't wait for our Paul from South Australia to go to Italy and do that course. It's really specific, but absolutely you can. So there you go. I think that's it. So well done, everyone. Sorry I rushed through a lot of those questions. This session is recorded, so if you want to go back over it, you can, or share it with friends and colleagues. Those of you who are left, please, can you quickly fill out this little poll? We'd love to know what state you're from and where you found out about the session. So if you could just do that for us before you sign out, that would be fantastic. If you're thinking about applying, I encourage you to do it. If you know you're applying, good luck with it. And thanks to Ganga and to Anita for your presentations. Thanks, everyone, and good night.